perfect. That's exactly what I have available.
Excellent. All right, let me just get onto it straight away then. All right, here we go. Welcome to Authority 5.0. Today we have a very, very special guest, Mel Schwartz, who is a psychotherapist, a marriage counselor, author of The Possibility Principle, 2 times TEDx speaker, podcaster, and leadership consultant. He earned his MSW from Columbia University in New York City and Master of Philosophy from Lancaster University in England. Mel has enjoyed several defining moments in his life, which has enabled him to live the life of the self-actualization that he espouses. Now, in midlife, in business, with 2 young children, Mel had been living the life he had planned, yet he felt a desire for deeper fulfillment, longing for a calling with far deeper purpose. In one of his defining moments, Mel chose to welcome the uncertainty that lay ahead as he embarked on an entirely new path. He closed his business, applied to and enrolled in graduate school to follow his emerging passion serving others as a psychotherapist. Mel became excited by new ways of thinking that propelled him to transcend the limiting protocols taught in graduate school. He began to immerse himself in emergent ways of thinking, coming from quantum physics, philosophy, and other areas beyond the field of psychology. This evolving perspective enabled him to forge a singular new therapeutic approach from which to assist his clients. Mel, I am so excited to have you on this show and on the front cover of Authority 5.0 magazine. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Mary. I'm delighted to be with you and look forward to our seeing what we can percolate together in this discussion.
Well, I have so many questions I want to ask you because you combine your core discipline, which is psychotherapy, with quantum physics and philosophy, 3 subject matters that I am absolutely obsessed with. So I want to give you a bit of, I want to take the readers and the listeners on a bit of a journey. And I kind of want to start off with my own story to put this into context, to set the stage, if you will. And then, ask you some very specific questions that lead from that. So in 2012, I went on a 12-month sabbatical. I resigned from my own software company that I built from ground up. And I decided to give up the entire hamster wheel, whatever that means to the individual, which included for me, giving up credit cards, social circles, friends, even family, to literally find myself. Now, I was fortunate. In a very fortunate position to have 2 brilliant mentors. One was a professor in philosophy and another an expert on the emotional body. In between all of that, I also did a quantum medicine course at Quantum University in Hawaii to learn about myself at a much, much, much deeper level. So what led me on this path, however, was Dr. Candace Pert's book, Molecules of Emotion. And I realized in myself that I am seriously stuck at a cellular level and need help, hence the radical change. But had I not made that radical shift, I actually would not have self-realized who I am. And obviously that's an ongoing discovery. So that leads me to you. It seems to me that self-help is keeping 80% of the population stuck on that hamster wheel, that same hamster wheel that I was on. We know that self-help doesn't work unless you're prepared to go to the core. And we also know that based on quantum medicine principles, if you will, that there are 3 aspects that need to be diagnosed: the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual. So that throws out 99% of self-help content. Now, you've taken your core discipline, which is psychotherapy. You've merged that with quantum physics with a focus on helping people live more fearlessly and achieve real transformation. Big difference here. So based on what you know now, and me sharing a bit of my personal experience, would you say that quantum physics involves a much, much, much bigger possibility of possibilities to real and permanent personal transformation?
Wonderful question. When I say great question, that means it's a question I don't have a quick answer for. And it opens up my curiosity. I can engage the question. For me, one of the aspects of quantum physics is what in physics is known as superposition. So superposition is a suspended state of reality, waiting for the next instant to manifest. And I looked at that. It's called the quantum wave particle duality in physics. And without going into the science of it, I extrapolated that and said, if that's the reality of the quantum world, why couldn't it be our reality also? And so I looked at that state of possibility and thought, what do we need to do to apprehend possibility or potentiality? And my experience, my conclusion, my insight was in the nanosecond before my next thought, I exist in the state of pure potential. But as humans, we tend to keep replicating the same thought ad nauseum. We become imprisoned by thought. Where does the thought come from? The thought comes from beliefs and experiences. And we confuse beliefs with being truth. So when I am working with people and see them locked in with certainty, I move into what is the belief that is creating this wellspring of thoughts that is imprisoning you. So the state of possibility that I was searching for was, could I apprehend that nanosecond before my next thought? I turned to philosophy, or I stumbled upon the work of Alfred North Whitehead, wonderful philosopher, who described something that he called concrescence. So concrescence he referred to as the stirring of energy before a thing actually becomes a thing. There's an energy before it manifests physically. So I looked at Whitehead's work around concrescence, and then I held up superposition in physics, and I kind of combined them, which is what I do. And there's an alchemy for me. And out of that alchemy is that aha moment where I thought, so if I can learn to apprehend the thought even just before it becomes a thought, I might get to be the master of my thinking, the master of my destiny. I might be able to access that realm of possibility. So I thought, well, how do I do that? So I started to develop what I call muscle memory. Throughout the day, I tune in and say, what was the last thought I had? I'd see it. I wouldn't judge it. I wouldn't interface with it. It's kind of like fishing where you catch and release. I see it and release it. Trying to develop a muscle memory, a keener awareness, so that there could be a sense of self that's sovereign to thought. So I am self having a thought. I should add that the work of the physicist David Bohm was invaluable to me in learning this process as well. So I took Bohm, the physicist, his work around thought, his work with Krishnamurti around thought, looked at the state of superposition in physics, looked at the work of Whitehead in concrescence, and started to see my breakthrough. Now, of course, as soon as I did that, I had to try it on in my therapy practice, of course.
Of course.
And this is now, 15, 18 years of now practicing this as a therapist. And what I say to the people who are interested and want to work with me on this, and it may not look like traditional therapy, it isn't traditional therapy, is this ability to develop the muscle memory around thought and not be the thought. It's not complex. It's simple. It's not easy because it requires determination and willfulness, but it is not complex. It's just an exercise. So whereas people will devote hours and hours a week to working out physically for the reward, well, we need to devote hours and hours a week to working out this apprehension, to see thought, to see feeling, not become the thought or feeling. And out of this, there's a wellspring of intuitive wisdom that occurs. So I don't much operate from thinking anymore. I've learned to access a deeper place, which I call intuitive wisdom. It's not hunch, it's not guesswork, it's just a deeper knowing.
Wow. So based on that, then, do you believe that we can then shed our old beliefs, behaviors, and of course, non-serving thoughts permanently?
Well, we can shed our old beliefs and thoughts permanently. Great questions, Mary. But we're, of course, developing new beliefs and thoughts. Okay, we're not existing in a void unless we're meditating on the mountaintop forever.
Mm-hmm.
So, but as we're developing new beliefs, we need to see them as my operating belief at this moment in time, instead of becoming wed to it as the truth or the truth about me.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote an article a long time ago called Who Am I? And in that article, I proposed it's the wrong question to ask because it begs for a specific and fixed answer. And we're not. We need to see ourselves as moving from being to becoming, from a human being to a human becoming. So instead, we should ask, how would I like to experience myself in my life? That's in the flow. It's not material. It's not inert. So to see this all from a state of flow, which is my belief. As long as I can see it, I'm not wed to it. I'm not imprisoned by it, as long as I don't confuse it with the truth.
Absolutely. So in one of your videos, you talk about how staying stuck in your familiar zone is like sleepwalking through life. And I'm guessing that you've based this also in your own personal experience as well. How do we become conscious of our environment and create an entire new reality? Because we're all running on this hamster wheel. We're watching the TV, and we just do, it's almost like we do as we're told. I don't watch TV. We don't even have a TV in our home. My kids don't watch the TV. I have no concept of what's going on, from a mass media standpoint. But this idea of consciousness really troubles me because there's so many different variations of it. And I think that one way to be curious or to ask constructive questions or to have the ability to self-inquire requires a high level of being present and grounded and conscious. How do we get to that state?
So my thoughts at this moment, the thoughts that I'm having, are telling me it's rather paradoxical. To be grounded actually requires a flight from being grounded. To be grounded, to me, suggests that I have to embrace uncertainty. If I am in any way seeking the comfort or familiar zone of predictability, it leaves me literally grounded, but stagnating. So what I'm going to say here is that to be truly conscious and aware might require not being grounded or not using the word grounded in the way we ordinarily would.
Yes.
So being at peace, being centered, for me, requires the embrace of uncertainty. Now, that doesn't mean life has to be radically challenging. I have to know what time the train arrives or when the kids come home from school. But to embrace uncertainty, another core principle of quantum physics, to embrace uncertainty requires becoming comfortable with not knowing.
Absolutely.
Actually embracing confusion. And as Western culture shuns confusion and not knowing, it's an embarrassment to not have an answer to a question. When I read a book, if I understand most of what I read in the book, it was a waste of my time. So I have a different paradigm which is to embrace confusion, because as long as I don't judge myself, then I'm opening up the portal of uncertainty, which is where new insight comes from.
I actually love that idea, Mel, because what it does is that it almost gives you permission to set yourself free from, the paradigm that we've all brought ourselves into. I mean, we all go into a crisis. How do you grow if you're not in some form of crisis? So I agree with that standpoint, but you're right. We buy this idea. I know I've been through this. I've got to be the perfect mom. I don't want to be judged. I want to make sure that, because my child is not like everybody else, that I don't want to be seen as, the left field mum or the black sheep mum or the mum that's, and so you kind of put all these limitations on yourself that you want to fit into a box. It's when you let go of that box and you think, you know what, I just don't care what people think. It is the way it is. And this is my reality. And I'm just going to go with it. There is a sense of freedom with that comes with that.
Well, what you're speaking to becomes the core of authentic self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
When we're worried or concerned about what we think other people think, that is what I call other esteem.
Mm-hmm.
And that betrays authentic self-esteem. Now, I'm not proposing that we should be callous or insensitive.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has opinions.
Mm-hmm.
But when we elevate someone's opinion and think of it as a judgment, we're doing that. We're projecting our judgment of self onto someone else. So I'm fond of saying, unless I'm appearing in the courthouse, the person with the long black robes gets to be my judge.
Yeah.
No one else does.
Absolutely. So can we just go back to the article that you wrote on Who Am I? I actually love that. I know it got a huge attention. I think it even went viral. The interesting thing is that when I went on my 12-month sabbatical, you wouldn't believe this, but the first thing that I did when I started that journey was literally walk to my computer and Google, who am I? I mean, it's just one of those questions that I think a lot of people do. And it actually was the impetus of the beginning of that journey for me, which is ongoing, but it was the trigger, if you will. So I know you say we should be asking different questions like, how would I like to experience my life? And which is a more expansive question, obviously. But when we're asking questions like that, how do I, what do I, why, those type of questions, for me, it's a process that I use through a form of journaling. When I'm journaling, it's like I'm writing to my higher self and I'm asking questions that I actually cannot solve with a linear mindset. I just don't have the answer. It's not possible for me to solve it. So turning to journaling for me has been a really interesting process of almost like unpeeling the onion layers. I'm talking to something out there. I'm writing to something out there. I'm asking something. And what's interesting is that I always get the answer. Is that a phenomenon? Like, because I know people are listening to this right now going, I want to know the answer here. So what's going on there?
I would say what you're experiencing is a correspondence.
Mm-hmm.
By asking questions or reflecting, you're corresponding with the universe. Now, the universe, what do we mean by this? I'm not speaking as a scientist, and I'm not speaking in a new agey spiritual way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
speaking as in a more integrated way.
Mm-hmm.
Between quantum physics and spirituality,
Mm-hmm.
because the science informs a sense of oneness.
Yeah.
So it's rather like synchronicity. Synchronicity, term coined by Carl Jung, is that when some phenomena occurs that cannot be attributed to coincidence or cause and effect, but it has a quality of profound personal meaning to you. He called that numinous. And I've experienced synchronicity a number of times, which have been life-altering. The material universe is corresponding with our conscious state. We are momentarily as one. And when you're journaling, you're corresponding with the inestimable, innate, profound intelligence and wisdom of the universe. So you are temporarily at one, and all of the information is available, and you get your answers.
I love that. That's exactly the answer I was looking for. You talk about 8 words that create havoc in our lives and keep us stuck. You say the words are is, am, are, were, was, be, seen, becoming, because you say that these words are fixed. Can you unpack this for us? Because I found this really fascinating, and it actually made me, it gave me a sense, it sort of opened up for me a much bigger dialogue within myself. And I really just, it forced me to just stop and really think about that and how they apply in my vocabulary on a day-to-day basis. So for the sake of our readers and listeners, can you take us on a journey on what that actually means?
So I did not originate this thought. It came from a book called Science and Sanity, written by Korzybski, an engineer in the 1930s. It's called E-prime language, eliminating the to-be verbs. They are the only verbs that are not action. They are inert and fixed. So in my conversations with great thinkers, the question comes up, why are we still stuck in the 17th century worldview of an inert, object-oriented reality given to us by Newton and Descartes? And as I considered it, I realized it's because our thoughts are rooted in to-be verbs, which is a language which is inconsistent with flow, movement, and quantum reality. So we haven't experienced sufficiently a paradigm shift because our language is rooted in century-old thinking. So let's just make that come to life. In couples counseling, there's an argument. Somebody's making objective statements using to-be verbs. You are disrespectful. No, I am not.
Yes.
Goes nowhere. I will reframe it. Say that without a to-be verb. I experience you as devaluing me. I can't say you're wrong, because now we're speaking of feelings and perception. That's what the person feels. The core of relationship is, do you care how I feel? But we speak objectively using to-be verbs. Ruin this. Self-worth. Profoundly, one evening in a group I'm facilitating, someone says, I'm a loser. I am a loser. I ask him to restate it without a to-be verb. He says, I feel like a loser. I've always felt like a loser, but his face lightened up. And I asked, what's going on? He said, well, that's how I've always felt, but that could change. I could feel differently. Yeah. If I am a loser, nothing changes. Our struggle with change, personally, individually, in relationships, so much is rooted in our being stuck in to-be verbs. I gave a TEDx talk on this topic. I'm very passionate about it, but it's a reach because it's not simple and quick. It takes a few moments to say, wow. And we live in a world, in a culture where we want quick fixes. But so much of our communication and relationship and growth, or pathology, you know, I am a depressed person, rather than I feel depressed. What a difference.
Absolutely, it does. So I want to just touch on, I know you're an expert in relationships, so I want to touch on that for a moment, but from a business relationship standpoint, because the audience here are mainly business owners. I have this concept, Mel, that I sell without selling. That's just my approach to sales, if you will. And my approach to sales and marketing is to get people to feel me at a heart level first and foremost. It's a longer game, but I attract the right clients all the time. So for me, Mel, it means I want to understand where my prospect is on their journey of life and start the dialogue from that place. In fact, it takes me 60 touch points before I convert a prospect into a client. Now, that's based obviously on many years of experience, but you actually have a methodology that you teach that invites a dialogue based on empathy and compassion. Can you share how we could use that approach in a business scenario?
Communication lies at the heart of it. Shared meaning. Shared meaning suggests that we use the same words, but they have differing meanings. Just, in a couple session, someone says to her husband, "You're not intimate. You don't know how to be intimate." He gets his back up. Of course I do. I have them each share what they mean by the word intimate. They mean different things. So in trying to establish a rapport and a deeper relationship business-wise, move into the words, have curiosity. What does that word mean to you? I want to be sure I understand what that experience was. To have a curiosity which opens up the pathway to dialogue. So dialogue, coming from the Greek dialogus, means flow of meaning. Dialogue means I suspend everything I think I know. I put it up on the shelf and I inquire. If I'm inquiring and curious, then I get to that place that you just described, that you're looking for. It's by not knowing, embracing uncertainty, and opening to dialogue. Real, genuine dialogue is a rare phenomenon. We have truncated conversations. We cut each other off. We don't have shared meaning. It requires slowing down and a curiosity, which then moves us into the field of empathy and compassion.
So would you then say that, so I want to just touch on what we touched on just earlier in our dialogue. Do you think that self-inquiry is important? You know, as I mentioned before, that my version of self-inquiry is actually going through that journaling process and asking big questions: what, how, what, why, etc. You know, taking, as you said, you took the woo-woo out of it, being a little bit more pragmatic. But is that an important, you know, part of the process of becoming compassionate and empathetic and having real dialogue, you know, going to a place of feeling and being rather than doing? Do you think that self-inquiry is a really big deal?
Well, going back to shared meaning, it depends upon what you mean and I mean, and the listeners mean by the word term self-inquiry. For some people, that would be analyzing self, which is dangerous. I don't believe in analyzing, because when we analyze, that's a deep, incisive cut, and we're not operating in wholeness. I do believe in self-reflection, evaluating, which is an attunement. So self-reflection for me is attuning, tuning into the disparate parts of me and hearing which part will speak to me. It may be the body, it may be the emotions, it may be my history, but tuning in is the key for me. It's more inductive than reductive.
Do you think that there is a relationship, there is a relationship, but can you help us understand it in very layman words, the relationship of the mind and the brain and the body? Who's driving our destiny? Is it the mind, the brain, or the body? Like, just layman, Isaac, because I know we haven't got 44 years to talk about this.
So no, we don't. So mind, body, brain are words that we created to describe aspects of ourselves. Is there really mind, body, brain? Do they exist unto themselves? Of course not. Thought and language started to make separate compartments of things that were not separate compartments. I'm fond of saying there's no mind-to-body connection because there's no mind-body separation. So the word connection is a fallacy. So my personal belief specifically around this is that brain is the receptor. It's not the producer of thought and feeling. I describe it this way. If you're walking at the beach, you look behind yourself and you see your footprint in the sand, you wouldn't think the sand produced your footprint. Your foot left its impression there. Thought and feeling leave its impression on the brain. The good news there is we're not hardwired. We have no wires. That's 17th century thinking. And we are not at the mercy of our brain chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
Once we come into a healthy habit of thought and feeling, our brain chemistry shifts accordingly. So I rather look at it through a vista of wholeness. And I always remind myself that these terms, these words, ego, they don't exist in reality unto themselves. We made them up to advance knowledge and for descriptive reasons, but it's always essential that we don't forget that we made it all up. And otherwise we become servant to the terms and the words, and it's useless.
Now, where do possibilities live then? So your whole philosophy, your whole, you're an authority on that one word. Where does possibilities actually live?
Everywhere. That's the natural state of being. It is the unnatural state that we foreclose on possibilities because of the way we were trained to think and live. I have to say that your questions are just wonderful.
Thank you, Mel.
You didn't ask a single question I have ever been asked before. Wow. So I have to really applaud you on wonderful questions.
Thank you. I have one last question because I know you're on schedule, which I ask every one of our guests, and I'm curious to know what your answer is. If you could meet somebody that's no longer living, who would it be, and what would you ask, or what would you want to know?
This answer is really going to surprise you and everyone listening. Frank Sinatra.
Wow. Tell us why. I love it.
I'm fascinated by him by the age of 13. Mm-hmm. Fearless individual. And notwithstanding his faults and flaws, and he had many, he had a tremendously intact self-esteem, which is, as opposed to other esteem, which I talked about earlier, and a passion and a presence and a fervor and a command and the mastery of his art that I never experienced anywhere else. And I heard him perform many, many times. So I would like to be in his company and ask him some questions.
Amazing, amazing. So Mel, thank you for being available and doing this interview. As I said, honestly, I could actually spend another hour with you because I've got so many questions. Maybe we do a part 2. I think that would be a great idea. We do a follow-up. I think that would be a really good idea. But if anyone wants to get in touch with you, is the best place for them to contact you through your website, melschwartz.com?
melschwartz.com.
And also LinkedIn, which is Mel Schwartz 7, as in number 7. People can look you up on LinkedIn as well. I'll have all your details anyway on the podcast and in the magazine.
One last thing I'd like to add, follow my Instagram account. I put up 60-second videos every day.
Amazing.
Mel Schwartz 7.
Mel Schwartz 7, that's on Instagram. So I'll have all those details as well. Mel, thank you so much. You've just been amazing. You made my day, and I'm really looking forward to, having this, releasing this issue, which will be in December. And I thought it would be a great idea to do it in December to get people on a great start on 2022. So hopefully we'll get some shift in mindsets and people will get in control of their thoughts and have a killer 2022.
Great, wonderful experience. I've had a wonderful time with you and would love to do round 2.
Thank you very much, Mel. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Bye, Mary.